Hello and welcome, listeners. I'm Anne DeButte, bringing you another look and perspective as we continue on with our Let's Talk About Grief show. Today we are going to be turning the tables and actually speaking with a grief recovery coach, Anthony. They walk with you, and you carry them through life with you, and you can have conversations to other people, and you can be in love and joy and not feel that heartache when you talk about them. That is the beauty of doing the work and healing. Wouldn't you agree?
I agree wholeheartedly. I had a instance where I was talking with this woman for the first time. She was so upset. She was crying because she had lost her love, and it was a struggle getting to the cemetery to find somebody. So she was irritated and she was frustrated and she was crying, So after she had talked about it for a while, I said, "You mind if I ask you a couple questions?" I said, "Do you believe that your loved one's spirit lives on?" And she says, "Yes." I just have one question for you. What is it that is keeping your loved one's spirit bound in the cemetery? And she said, "His spirit is all around." I said, "Well, then why do you need to go to the cemetery and talk to her?" And you could just feel the weight lifted off. And that's the beauty when we allow that connection to come through. Your loved one is all around you. They're there. They're in the mix. They're in the spirit. You can have a conversation with them anytime. You can share what you're doing with them anytime, as long as we stop carrying all that weight.
What would you say is your most unique approach to grief?
And so I realized, I'm going to answer that question, but I realized in answering my last question that I sort of got caught on one particular myth and never got off of that one. Let me just say that I did want to definitely mention another one, because I think it is very much prevalent with a particular type of loss, which is the loss of a child. The very last myth, the 14th one in this book, is this myth. And see if this sounds familiar if you lost a child. As a mother, I was supposed to have saved my child.
Big time.
So we have so many people that are walking around, and if you don't know their situation, you would never be able to see this on their face. But they are carrying the ultimate weight of this guilt because they feel like they failed.
Yeah.
And again, we talk about the myths locking you in that dark place. They work against you. You have a predetermined disdain for anything that moves you out of where you are. So you embrace the darkness and you embrace the pain, even though it's working against you and it's working against your connection with your loved one. So in the case of that particular myth, because there's so much guilt about feeling like they failed, like it was their responsibility, then they cannot allow themselves the ideal of healing, of having a life, that whether it's conscious or unconscious, that they don't deserve it. And again, it's a myth. It's a complete fallacy. So the way that I speak to that in the book, and I've worked this through with my clients, is what I say to them is something along the lines of this. The problem with us is we get delusions of grandeur as humans. That's what we do. We start to think things, and we all want to be the hero in our own story. So when we tell our story, it's like we are the ones. And the mother, even in this situation when she has lost her child, somewhere along the way, the illusion gets built in that she at some point was, I don't know, a superhero or a demigod or something, somebody able to control all things and know all things. Mm-hmm. Well, that couldn't be further from the truth.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you, as a parent who lost your child, if you were able to control all things, your child would not have had 1 second of pain in their life. But that wasn't true. It wasn't true because you never had the ability to control it. The way I say it in the book is basically I believe that mothers, when they have a child, they're given their heart is swapped out. And they're given an angel grade heart, right? And that means that they always have more love. They can never run out of love. They got love, 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 love. You weren't given a cape. You weren't made into this all-being, all-present person that would know all things about your kid and could predict the future and everything. So the reality is you did everything that you knew to do in the time.
Yeah.
I know that because you were a decent mother. You were a decent father. You were a decent parent. So the ideal that you are blaming yourself for things that were beyond your awareness, for things that were beyond your ability to know, all you're doing is locking yourself in that pain. And you may feel that. You may feel that through the bones, and it is deep. And I know that I failed. Well, you only feel it not because it's accurate, but because that's what you're telling yourself.
Yeah, that's the story around it. Yeah.
Thoughts. We turn around those thoughts, you'll stop feeling that way. And absolutely, if you can find somebody to work with to help you step through that, then what you'll come to realize, because this is what I've seen in virtually every situation, that the perspective comes back because you realize that the things that you were doing, you had blocked those out. Because once you got on that mindset that said you failed, that's all you're thinking about. But the truth is that you did things, you did everything you knew to do. And so life was never ours to control.
Yeah.
You don't control your own life. You don't control your loved one's life. And this is the deal. We never had any promises. We never had any guarantees. And this is what we signed up for. We were happy to take those people into our lives, whether it was the birth of a child or a loved one that we met on some street that we never expected to find. We were happy to take that love, that new relationship into our life and enjoy it every day.
Yeah.
But the truth is that we also signed up for the randomness of it all. Question about what's unique, what's different about me. I think you're hearing it like you said, and I think you heard it in that story. There's the directness. Yes. There's the going back to the bully in the schoolyard. You got to go straight. People are so locked into this stuff. This is what I found. Mm-hmm. People are so locked into this stuff that you're not going to get it there by shaking them a little bit. Sometimes you got to put facts in front of them. Mm-hmm. One of the best compliments I've gotten, one client said to me, I've been all kind of people, they weren't able to help me. But you know what's different about you, Coach? You don't let me get away with my own BS.
That is the beauty of the coaching process, because you can actually see people's blind spots and work your way through. I know I love comments like that, especially when it comes from a man who said, she was pretty tough on me. I didn't believe it. So I'm thinking, but I'm usually such a kind, compassionate person. But I think when I see somebody tripping themselves up, then it's like, I'm going in there and we're going to whittle this away. So exactly. I love, you're real and you tell it how you see it. And I think that is part of your compassionate success.
I think the other thing is this. When I see my nature, my approach is, if I see a problem, there's a solution to it. Go find a solution. And so I don't see grief as being any different. I think that's a mistake when we put grief in its own separate category. Just like I said, what is grief if not trauma? So we want to see grief in a way that says there's nobody else that understands it and is permanent and it can't be understood and all this. As we start to adopt that line of thinking, what that does is it further limits our options. But if we start to understand that, first of all, grief is trauma, that opens up the options. And then if we understand that grief, that the loss is a traumatic event in our life, and we are impacted by all kinds of traumatic events in our life, and they affect us to whatever extent, but there is a path forward. depending upon our openness to be healed, then why should grief be any different?
Absolutely. Do you find people also get caught up in my grief is more important than your grief?
Oh, absolutely. And that is something that I will fight against whenever it shows up. A lot of what I do is I use reason. And when you can use reason and get people to be willing to look at the reason in an unbiased way, it kind of disarms all of the emotional stuff. And so here's my analytical or reasoned answer to that. The reality is what you're talking about is a comparison. There's only one way that you can do a comparison, and that is to be able to have an understanding of both sides. You understand what you are going through, but you can never understand what the other person is going through. And so when it really comes down to it, purely from an analytical perspective, you have no ability to say whether your pain is more or less than anybody else's. And so when you step into that area, you are totally inaccurate. You cannot be informed enough to make that as a rational thought. And so if it's not a rational thought, it's coming from emotion. But yes, I've had my fair share of times when people lose somebody and like if they've lost a child, the question that typically comes back is, have you ever lost a child? And I say, no. Why do you ask? Well, you can never understand. Well, you're right. I can never understand how you feel and but you know what? You can never understand how anybody else feels. And then sometimes people are in that mode for so long, they've built that shield up around that ideal that nobody else can help them, nobody else can understand. You don't know what you're talking about. And then that's when, my unique approach ends up saying, oh, okay. So I guess I should go tell all the mothers I have helped over the years that they are wrong, that they're not better, that they don't have that connection with their children again because it's not possible, because you say it's not possible.
What impact would you most want to make on this grief industry?
Part of what my message is, and I really get into this in the book, is that part of the reason why people think that grief is as powerful as it is and as permanent as it is because they don't really know what grief is. Okay. But the reality is, when we talk about recovery, we're not saying that you won't have a sad day every now and then. Mm-hmm. We're not saying that you won't share a few tears on a milestone or an anniversary, but that's not grief. That's not grief. We call it grief. We think it's grief. We think any time that we're thinking about that person and feeling sad is grief. It's not grief. Grief is when it overwhelms and controls your life. Grief is when everything else is built on that pain and misery. And that's the part that doesn't have to be permanent and can go away. But not everybody understands that. Yeah. And so some of these groups out there that you're going to get people that are experiencing the exact same thing. But here's the analogy that I have for you to consider as you decide, as you're out there and you decide we've managed to convince you that you're going to go find some help. Here's a little bit of perspective that I want you to add into your decision making as you decide who you're going to find to help you or what, whether it's some group. If there is an illness that you have, some rare illness that exists in the world that affects a certain part of your mind and it affects the way that you act, and it's pretty rare, but you have it and it's devastating to you. When it's time for you to want to go and find the best way to deal with that and find the best way, more importantly, to recover from that, which of these two options are you most likely to take? Are you going to go and find a group of people who have the same ailment and meet with them and you all spend time talking about how that ailment is affecting you and what you had? Yeah, I had that too. I had that. Well, let's meet again next week. And remember, nobody else understands this but us. Or Are you going to seek out a professional who, by the way, has never had that illness, but has the information, has the tools, has the expertise to help resolve that issue? Factor that into your choice. I believe that life is so important that we're here for a reason. Now that I've clicked on to that this is part of my reason, or this is a big part, this is the main part of my reason, I'm not about doing it small. So what do I want to do? I want to change the conversation on grief. I want to take this out of the shadows. I want us to stop being afraid of the ideal of death. See, death is a motivator to me. Death is a reminder to me that my time here isn't limitless. And so I need to get the most out of each and every day. That's what death reminds me of.
Live every day as if it was your last.
Live every day as if it was your last. Carry this however we want. We can't go back and change it. It doesn't work that way. So how about we process it in a way that we can be a little bit better as people. Maybe not better off because our loved ones aren't here anymore, but we can be a little bit better and we can make their spirits proud of us. Mm-hmm. That's what I think.
That's beautiful. So really that has also answered the next part, is how survivors handle grief going forward, is to think about what their loved ones would be saying to them. And they wouldn't want to see them suffering for years because they're holding on to what they think is their loved one.
Exactly. Maybe even take it further. You spend all this time thinking about the heartache, thinking about all the pain, thinking about all the things. What is, why didn't I do this? Why didn't I know? I had a bit of a challenge for you today. Carve a little bit of time out of your schedule and think about, if you buy into this ideal that your loved one's spirit lives on and is all around you, what is it? Brainstorm a list. What is it that you could do that would make them the proudest ever of you, that would cause them to smile so deeply and so authentically that you could feel that love, that you can feel that connection in a whole different way? What is it that you could do? What little things could you do today? What big things could you start today and move forward that would bring that kind of just pride into their spirit realm, so that you could find that and feel that yourself? Brainstorm a quick list and then begin to do those things off that list and just watch how that impacts your life.
Beautifully said. So you have a challenge now. What's next for D'Anthony?
What's next? So I'm going to do more interviewing. I'm going to start to do some speaking things. I'm going to start to try to go out, speak at some of the gatherings, some of the regular group meetings, those that would be open to a different kind of message.
Yeah.
Because if I'm going to change the conversation on grief, like I say I want to, then I got to have the conversation on grief and not just have it in the social media space.
Yeah.
And so I'm warming up to that. I'm going to do more of that. And even as far as doing lives, Facebook Lives, a closed Facebook group called Stronger Than Grief. And I do that inside the group. I have it closed so that people can actually feel comfortable to share.
And you mentioned that you coach mainly women. That is on my bio. And I have the little addition. When people ask me why women, I say because men don't ask. So men really, really need this just as much as women. And it's not to be seen as a weakness. It is actually a strength to ask for help.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. In fact, there are a lot of men that need it more than women need it, because the conditioning in our society now is that this whole men have to be strong. So they lock down their feelings much deeper than women do. So at least the women are more likely to talk about some of this and to get in the group. Men, they lock it all in. They feel like failures. So it's not that I don't coach men. I coach men as well, but pointing that out, men need this. And I think the thing that if there are any men that are listening, here's the real opportunity, because when you work one-on-one with a coach that knows what they're doing, that's worth their weight in salt, you don't get a more confidential environment. You don't get a better opportunity to just be who you are and not worry about anything expanding out. What does it hurt to try it? New perspective makes all the difference in the world. You have people that love you. When they want you to heal, it's not because they don't care. It's not because they don't want to understand. It's just the opposite. It's because they love you. They don't want you to forget about your loved ones. They want you to find a way that you can not forget about your loved ones, but still not be in this crushing pain. And they typically separate themselves from you because they can't deal with seeing you in this crushing pain, not because they don't love you. So invariably, when people start to heal, when people start to change their perspective and start to carry this all differently, they are so amazed at how the people, their loved ones, flow right back into their lives. That's what your lost loved one wants. Your lost loved one wants you to get back there. They want you to honor those relationships. They want you to care about the very same people that they cared about. Yeah. And they want you to care about you.
So, powerful message. Watch your thoughts. Watch your stories that you're telling yourselves. And if there are loved ones in your life, heal your broken heart for them. Powerful, powerful reminder, because there could be children, and there are children that get forgotten, or there are other loved ones, husbands, wives, that
parents,
get caught up, exactly, or get caught up in the fray.
I need to say siblings, because something that I've seen with the siblings is that there is a burden that they carry that they feel like they're always forgotten. Yes. Okay, so I need to make sure we put siblings on that list. There are siblings as well.
Siblings, and they can carry the grief of being still alive and their sibling that lost their lives. So yes, definitely need to have you back on the Let's Talk About Grief show. As you can see, we are passionate about what we do, and it hurts us, I think, when we see people giving up their lives and burying themselves in the pain and the misery that they call grief. Let's hope people will reach out to yourself, to me, to anybody, as you said. Don't suffer. Live every day as if it was your last. And I'm going to leave that with you, listeners. Until our next show, I want to say, this is Anne from Reconnect from Grief, signing off. It's been a blessing and a pleasure having you, Dee Anthony, and thank you for listening to our show. Take care. Bye-bye for now.
Take care.